Colton and I are going to talk about a scenario where a pedestrian claims to have been hit by a motor vehicle, so a truck or a car, and the person driving that truck or motor vehicle is denying it and saying, I didn't hit this person, they just fell. Hi, I'm Andrew Iacobelli. I'm a personal injury lawyer with Iacobelli Law Firm.
My name is Colton Leung, and I'm a personal injury lawyer at Iacobelli Law Firm.
And in this show, we talk about your rights and remedies following a serious accident or injury and try to help you get informed so you can make decisions to secure your future. We've actually had a few files, quite a few files like this, where people have come to us and said, I was hit by a car and I was injured. It's not really clear in the police report whether or not they were hit or not hit. So do you have a case where there's that kind of dispute? And what do we do as your lawyers, some of the strategies to help advance that kind of claim, okay, where there's a real fight on liability? I know you had one recently, so tell me, when you first see the police report and it's different than what the client has told you in terms of how the accident happened.
One of the first things I would do is to see whether or not there are any witnesses listed in the police report. If that's the case, we're going to try to get the witnesses' information so that we can get a statement from them. If there are competing stories to the accident, a witness statement is very helpful in terms of trying to resolve issues of liability and how it occurred.
I've seen this so many times. You get a police report. So the first thing we get is a really simple motor vehicle accident report that is a standardized form, but it doesn't give you a lot of information. It has a very simple diagram and it lists the involved parties and it may list if there were witnesses. And if there are written statements taken of anyone involved or any witnesses, it's really interesting because sometimes it's not always what's in the statement that's important, it's what the police officer didn't ask. Then we would go and try to reach out to these witnesses directly, or if the client, like you said, had contact information, reach out to them directly and see if we could get more information to find out.
To fill in the blanks, essentially.
Yeah, to find out what really happened. What other evidence did the police collect? Did they look at the vehicle? Did they see if there was any rub marks on it or any transfers? Was the car dirty? If it was in the winter time, there could be salt on the car. Did our client take photographs or anybody take photographs at the scene of the accident? Because sometimes you'll find some information there. Personally, I like to go to the accident scenes, whether there's advanced turn signals, how the walk signals work on that particular intersection. You can learn a lot and also, I think, come up with a lot of new questions by just walking the scene and just observing it for a while. We had a case exactly like this where they said, the defendant said he didn't hit this person. The police said they didn't hit, there was no evidence of an accident, that the person just fell in the middle of the road.
We went back to the scene of the accident to see whether or not there were any video footages around the area.
That's right.
Unfortunately, there were no dash cams, and that's why we did that. Some businesses cooperated and let us review their footage. It's not always like that. Some businesses, they don't want you to take a look at their footage. So we would request a subpoena from court so that they provide that as documentation and as evidence to use in our case.
That would have been an easy solution, actually, to that case if we could have just found some video showing the car hitting him. I remember the video, you could see the ambulance lights and stuff like this, but it
was just off of camera.
Didn't catch the area where the actual impact occurred, so we couldn't determine it. So in that case, I actually went down and I met with the police officer. I wanted to hear from the police officer what he did, who he spoke to, how he made this determination. Because the driver ended up dying for unrelated reasons. So that person's evidence was no longer available. We were never going to hear his side of the story. Because our client left by ambulance, the police officer interviewed the driver that remained on scene who denied ever hitting our client and formed an opinion or conclusion without ever getting the other side of the story. To me, I saw that as a really incomplete investigation. And so we had to step in. This was downtown Toronto, right at rush hour when people were leaving work and heading to the subway. Because of the way those streets work, they were turning onto one-way streets, so multiple lanes going the same direction. And what we learned was a lot of cars would make turns around bunches of pedestrians. So if the pedestrians were in the closest lane, they would turn around them. That was exactly the scenario that was described by our client, was that this car had tried to go around a bunch of pedestrians and he was a few steps behind, and that's when he got hit. The client had sustained a fracture to his leg. The police had concluded that our client was never struck by the car, but had suddenly just tripped and fell in the roadway, okay? And it was making up the whole story about the car being involved. For us, we looked at the injury itself to see was that consistent with a trip and fall. Having it looked at by a biomechanical engineer, this is an engineer that studies how forces act on the body, we were able to determine that it was almost impossible to get that kind of fracture from just simply tripping and falling. In fact, I remember the surgeon saying he could not have got that fracture without trauma, without impact from like a vehicle or something, unless he jumped from 3 stories and ended up in the roadway. That broke the case, and it changed the whole mindset of the defense, and then they realized they needed to pay. Sometimes you don't find any of that stuff that breaks the case and really proves that it's your client telling the truth. You're kind of going with your instinct at that point, because you're only going to take on that case if you believe your client, that they're sincere, that they're honest, because you want to help these people. There's been other situations where there was no evidence. It was really a he said, she said. For me, if I believe the client, then I want to go and take the deposition of the defendant. And we've had cases like that too, where
we went to the deposition. The client was very likable. She was very credible.
Yes. The defendant fell apart. Their story fell apart because they had it very rehearsed, the simple story.
And it didn't make sense. Their version of the story doesn't make sense when you question them further. It didn't make sense. So
when you start digging.
Yeah, so it became apparent that our client was telling the truth, and even the defense lawyer after that, clearly.
That's always a great outcome, when the defense lawyer tells you, my client's obviously lying.
Maybe not in those exact words, but...
Well, pretty close.
Yeah. Maybe they won't admit it, but they're gonna say, okay, your client's very credible. Okay, let's see what we can do about the file and move on, type of thing, right?
Right.
The truth usually comes out at the end.
Yeah, and if it doesn't come out, the lie becomes a little more obvious, that somebody's not being forthcoming, right? Yeah, I agree. I think we covered most of what your lawyer could do for you in the case where the driver is denying or disputing how the accident occurred. Every case is completely different, obviously. Hopefully through this scenario, you got to see how important it is to get to the information as soon as possible. That can make all the difference in a case. Get a lawyer quickly involved, because people's memories fade. If there are videos, they don't keep them, especially private residences and companies, they usually re-record over it. So you want to get those videos preserved immediately. You want to get witnesses interviewed immediately, and just start looking at the whole picture as soon as you can, so that you can figure out where the best opportunity is to find the truth and tell your story and successfully resolve your case. If you've been involved in an accident and you have questions, call us anytime. Our phones are answered 24/7. Consultations are always free. Contact information will be listed below in the show notes.